Justin Young.
Cut out for a bit, but I think you're back. I I'll give you my camera. I was going to leave it off because I have a messy room, and but I bring it up in my talk, so it's all relevant.
All right, I have him locked on, but I'll turn it so we can see you. There we go.
Oh, there we
Nice
go.
guitars in the back there, bud.
Yeah, I got a new Moog synthesizer. I've been digging it. It's been fun times.
All right, cool. I thought that was fascinating what he's been able to do.
Oh, most definitely. Just the innovation of our customers on top of our platform is always impressive to me in integrations and just to see where it's going.
Great. What you going to talk about today?
Today, I want to talk about the landscape around these Git platforms. So the GitHub introduction was pretty good, and it's very relevant to where I'm going.
All right, cool. You can share your slide deck then, share your screen, and I'll
Most
back
definitely.
off, and I will be here if you need some help.
All right, here I go. So this is me. I'm Justin Young. I'm a product manager of platform integrations at Sonatype. We're responsible for such hits as the Nexus platform plugin for Jenkins, the IDE plugins, firewall for Artifactory. If you're using Nexus IQ Server, generally you're going to have policy and information and data radiated to the tools that you're using every day. And that is our purview, and that's what we're responsible for. So I did a little spoiler, but my talk's component intelligence at the source. I wrote the title well before I had any idea what I was going to talk about. I just knew I didn't want to do a live demo like last year. I didn't have the nerves for it. So instead, you're going to get kind of inane ramblings from a product manager, and I hope they're useful. This is not a roadmap. I, as a job, make roadmaps, but instead I want to talk about how I see the landscape today, how I see SonoType finding solutions, how I see competitive vendors finding solutions, and how I see AppSec teams and engineers kind of coming together to solve the supply chain management of components issue. So please don't hit me up with promises I make today. Yeah, we'll see. All right, so I'd like to start the talk in a time machine and go back to 2013, where a younger Justin Young was hired by Sonatype as an engineer. I came into Sonatype to do development, and I had some experience with NuGet and some Maven experience, but it was mostly as an understanding of kind of, I have these components out there and they're kind of their code, and I'm more or less copying and pasting it into my application. Kind of akin to Stack Overflow, but Maven made this easy. I didn't really understand the nuances or even kind of big details about what was happening. So like what happens when you start at a company, I build all our software, and then I started to use it and try to figure out what my next step in my career was going to look like. What would I be building? As a developer, I spent a good swath of my time in the IDE. I was writing code, and that's what I was paid to do. And so it makes sense that it wasn't until I kind of started to use our IDE plugin that I truly got the message. Before as I said, I felt like there was just code. There weren't components. But given all these attributes about the components, given the policy that my company was enacting upon me and my component selection, I started to see the ease that Sonatype provided me to do my job. I didn't have to go search on the internet about a component. I didn't have to talk to my security team or my legal team. I didn't have to talk to architects. All that data was available to me. So I could start to do my job a lot more efficiently. And this is, selecting components and bringing new features to my application, but also when there's an issue and I got a bug raised, let's say a security vulnerability, it was pretty easy to remediate that. And I could start to do that almost as a rote experience and spend most of my time doing high-level things like bringing business value and intellectual property to my company. This particular plugin has served us very, very well. And I'm sure all the customers online have seen this. We lead with it a lot of times because it is very grokkable, and it truly does show what we're about at Sonatype. And it's also stayed fairly static, but I definitely want to take a second here to point out that we announced a new edition this week. And what we did, you can see the little UI change, put that histogram front and center, but more importantly, we added recommended versions. So this is the ability as a developer to not have to do that additional research, to say Sonatype understands component selection, Sonatype understands my organization's policy and the policy that affects my particular application. Therefore, I can entrust them in component selection, especially when it's just a version upgrade. This again, it goes towards that as a developer, I want to be doing high level work. I don't want to be choosing which version is going to be appropriate to my company's policy, which version doesn't have a security violation, or which doesn't have a, I don't know, GPL license, something like that. So that was released this week. Very excited that the team was able to get that out. I'm also excited that we are going to be subsequently releasing the migrate feature to IDEA and Visual Studio. So those Eclipse users out there have had this ability to click a button and update the manifest almost immediately for a long time. We're finally getting around, maybe too long, but getting around to the other IDEs and providing that feature to IDEA and Visual Studio. Again, let's do the rote tasks for you so you can focus on important things. Something else happened in 2013. I worked for my first commercial company that was on GitHub. I had done some private things on GitHub, worked on some open source projects that were hosted on GitHub, but before that, the companies I worked for used different source control systems, and GitHub were relatively new at the time. I think GitHub was a couple years old and just starting to get some really big traction. As an engineer, I loved it. The Git, not really GitHub specific, but Git favors nonlinear development. I could make branches easily. I can move commits around. A branch was just a reference. And because of that, it really allowed me to start to build features and understand how I develop software in a non-linear fashion. There were no file lockings. I could develop on the same file as a coworker. We could be doing collaborative development. And that collaborative development didn't stay in Git itself. GitHub promoted it. For a long time, their brand was social coding. It's the place where we go to develop together. So they provide features like comments on PRs, discussion, being able to +1, -1 different PRs, and have kind of a source of all this kind of communication around your project. I noticed as GitHub became more popular, and maybe as I became a little more senior in my career, that my time in the IDE was starting to get shared with time in GitHub. Not only would I be doing my development, but I would be reviewing other people's code and providing comment and feedback and stuff like that. And this was in a tool that I had easily accessible. It wasn't going to a conference room or boiler room and kind of hunkering down and going over manual code reviews. This was something that was easily accessible from my computer that I could do whenever I needed to, and the information would be shared with the entire team. So this was cool. I wasn't just IDE everything anymore. I was at least had two tools. All right, so we still use GitHub at Sonatype, but it was 5 years later, let's see, until last year that I actually got to build something for GitHub on GitHub. And the team built Sonatype DEPShield. DEPShield is a product that provides continuous monitoring of your open source projects for component hygiene. It uses Sonatype OSS Index. OSS Index is a large database of vulnerabilities that we maintain to provide GitHub issues, like we were just talking about, GitHub issues to your open source or private projects. It's a free service that we provide out there. We find that this is a useful service to the community, that a lot of these features are starting to get commoditized, and we really need to be out there helping people develop better software. So Sonatype DEPShield. DEPShield has about 16,000 repositories we're monitoring right now. We support both Java and JavaScript. So if you have any interest, please check it out. We also have a few more ecosystems or languages coming over this summer. And I'm not going to spoil those today, but I'm sure we'll announce them soon. So while developing DEPShield, we were able to learn some things. The integrations team built the product, we put it out there, we got feedback from the community, and as software goes, we built iteratively. For the majority of the rest of this talk, I want to talk about those learnings and how they shaped my vision for what source control means and source control management platforms can do for supply chain management. So the things we learned. Builds are complex and highly configurable. There's a reason why Jenkins has been around for a long time and it has continuous development, and there's a reason why there's a wide breadth of CI options. The technology that we built DEPShield on relied on us building other people's code, and it fell down fairly quickly. We saw that more often than not, someone had a private Nexus repository manager that they were pulling artifacts from, or NPM components or something like that. Or perhaps they had an extensive script that happened before or after the build that we were unable to recreate. We learned that source control management platforms, they provide a consolidated ecosystem for tooling. This is something that I would have never guessed. 2013, Justin would have never thought that you would have a GitHub marketplace that would offer so many different types of tools. You can do your CI. Even in GitHub now, with GitHub Actions, you can do Maven builds. You get your SaaS tools. You get your software composition analysis tools like DEPShield. You get code quality tools. There's so much around just the source control itself. And lastly, developers care about the hygiene of their components. I think that this should have been known, and I kind of knew it, but I thought the problem was a little more opaque. But if you look out at all the vendors now offering options, GitHub now has their own security vulnerability dashboard, and then you have DEPShield and tons of other competitors with it. This kind of red tide of companies who are providing commodity security vulnerabilities is growing and growing into a market who readily accepts them. As I said, we're getting about 1,000 new repositories in DEPShield a month. And that's with all these other competitive vendors, and with GitHub providing that in the source control platform itself. So developers are hungry and interested in understanding all the data they can have about their components, and they'll reach out to as many vendors as they can to get that information to build better software. All right, so those were the learnings, and I want to talk a little bit more about each of them. The first was builds are highly complex and configurable. So when I talk to our customers, it's a pretty common pattern to have a federated system where each development team kind of manages their own process. Some go through DevOps transformations to try to consolidate this, but in general, even those who have successfully had a DevOps transformation find that they have a lot of different teams with a lot of different build systems. So I go into an organization and I see maybe a GitLab, a few Jenkins, an Azure DevOps, maybe a TeamCity instance, maybe even an aspiring engineer, Brad, who has a computer under his desk that he's pumping out production artifacts with. That prevents a pretty difficult problem for vendors to provide value to all these different systems. Maybe I can talk to someone who owns a major, maybe the consolidated Jenkins instance. Maybe I can shell into it and add a plugin. But Brad's never going to let me connect to his computer under his desk and install a policy evaluator. What I do notice is that despite all these disparate build systems, code is generally getting pulled from one or two places. Maybe there's a GitLab or Bitbucket instance up there. Maybe there's a GitHub SaaS and GitHub Enterprise, but that's not too many different places. That's one consolidated place where a vendor can provide a lot of value. So this explains kind of why source control has built this ecosystem around it. Because if I want to touch all of a company's most valuable IP and provide additional value on top of it, their code, the source control provides that for me. That platform allows me to do that. So it's a fantastic opportunity for a company to start to really provide value quickly to the engineering organization. Some of this is even reflected in the natural progression of tools at Sonatype. We have I think a documentation bit that was built by our customer education team, and we have a community plugin that takes data from policy results from Jenkins and push them to GitHub and to Bitbucket. So even through natural growth, I have validation that this is important to people. So I think we covered why source control management is big, why builds are complex. Developers care about hygiene of their components, about the hygiene of their components. So we have a lot of data. Every year Sonatype does a State of the DevOps report, and we have a lot of data showing that open source maintainers quickly fix bugs and security violations. The maintainers care about these things. They want to have the best product. They want to put their best foot forward, and so they will fix anything wrong with their components. GitHub has validated that with news, I think it was last week, where they now afford private places to report security vulnerabilities and private branches to triage these and fix these. So open source groups can fix things better and quicker. And we talked about how open source consumers are replacing broken and vulnerable components, leaning into things like DEPShield or the GitHub security vulnerabilities. Open source consumers want to get these things fixed. Engineers care about the problem. So one practice I've seen that has arisen from this is the idea of evergreen dependencies. Coming from a Maven background, it's maybe scary. The future is scary, but a little different than how I would have expected people to go about fixing problems. But NPM allows you to have your package JSON file always be updating every time you do a build. Or there's products like Greenkeeper and Dependabot who will create pull requests for you that keep you on the latest version of a component. I was able to talk to Gray Baker, the CEO of Dependabot at GitHub Universe, and conversation with him finally shed light to me why this matters, why people want to be always up to date. He said that it wasn't a desire to be on the latest version. As an engineer, I don't need all these latest features. I'll get them when I need them. But instead, I want to reduce the risk of upgrading when there is a problem. When there is a security violation out there, I want to have done the incremental work to always update so I can go to the latest version. As promised, I was going to talk about my dirty room. So my analogy is you always keep your house clean. And if you iteratively keep your house clean, then when the in-laws come in, you don't have to spend hours to clean your room to allow them into the house. Now, I'm not necessarily sold on evergreen dependencies. I am sold on the efficiency. And that probably could be told by the fact that everyone here has seen my room if you joined a couple of minutes early. It's pretty dirty. I don't do the iterative cleaning. So why does efficiency matter? I want to allow people to work smart and not hard. This has to be done early so that we don't add a lot of code and a lot of complexity to making changes. And so that's why I still love the IDE plugin. As an engineer, the first time I see a component is in the IDE. I start writing the code, I change my package JSON, and all of a sudden I have a new component. I should have the data there to know what to do. But if not in the IDE, the second best thing to do is catch it in a branch before it goes to master. So if we can provide that data into GitHub so that you understand what the implications of merging a branch are, then you can have your tech lead or your more senior person who's now spending 40% of their time on GitHub looking through reviews, all the data that she needs to say, don't merge this because it will cause problems down the road. We talked about evergreen and security vulnerabilities and being on the latest. I think efficiency is defined not just by the latest. And it's not just defined by security vulnerabilities. There's a lot of information that Sonatype thinks about when you choose components. So security vulnerabilities alone, I could have a particular application that's public facing that I would not want to deploy an RCE to. It's easy choice. But maybe I have an internal application where I want to remediate an RCE, but there's a deserialization vulnerability that I know that this is not going to be applicable. So I can generate policy around that to inform what my remediation suggestions are. Likewise, there's legal ramifications. Projects don't generally change their licenses, but that is a possibility. And architectural. So what does it mean to upgrade to the next version? Should I upgrade to the latest, or should I upgrade to the one that's API compatible with my current code? I have a company that has many, many different applications. As an architect, I probably want recommendations to make my job easier, to coalesce the component versions at my organization. So during the process of making these remediations, whether I'm trying to get out of a GPL situation or I have a security vulnerability I'm trying to fix, can I encourage developers to pick the same component versions and the same components so that I have the mind share at an organization of what that means, having that component means. If another vulnerability comes in the future, if all my teams are on the same version, we should all understand how to remediate it. Take that to the next step and say, well, if one particular application remediates this, how can we help other teams remediate? That knowledge should be in my at my organization, and Nexus IQ should be able to provide that to all the different teams. So that's remediation. GitHub is a platform for social coding. It's collaboration. And I want to talk about that for a bit because that's been on my mind. I think that, that engineers use GitHub very well to talk to each other. But the problem is that component management is not just an engineering problem. It is an organizational problem. And I just heard from someone, I forgot which customer, and I probably shouldn't say anyhow, but that their AppSec teams were actually in GitHub. That's unique. Application security has their own vulnerability management systems. Developers have their own source control systems. So at SonoType, how can we facilitate the collaboration and communication across these two groups? If my developers are in GitLab and writing some comments about how they remediated a security vulnerability, can I provide that to my AppSec team? Or if my AppSec team is trying to triage a particular vulnerability across many, many different teams and they have guidance and extra insight, how can they share that with the developers? This type of collaboration is crucial for transformations at organizations. And if we truly want what we call DevSecOps, it's a cultural transformation. I think that starts with open collaboration and open conversation. That builds empathy, that builds understanding. And while tools may be disparate, if Sonatype can provide a mechanism for communication across disparate tools, I think we could take one step towards fulfilling this transformation. All right, so I think that was about 20 minutes of vision and blathering, but what have you done for me lately? I would like to talk about some things that we're going to release very soon. So the first thing, teams in development with this right now, is we're going to be able to provide GitHub commit statuses to your commits. So this can inform pull requests, this can inform commits. GitHub does a good job of providing a UI around this, and then some features like, as you can see here, do you still want to merge this even though you know that IQ says there's some failing policy on it? This is going to be first class. It will work with any type of application that's configured for GitHub. So you can be using the CLI, you can be using the Jenkins plugin, the Bamboo plugin. However you want to use it, we will be able to take the data from Nexus IQ and put it to the commit so that we can catch these things earlier. This will allow for communication too. So once I get this into my GitHub view, I can start to talk about it. Ask an engineer why this particular violation came up. What can be done to fix it? Or what kind of record do we have to make right now? Quick behind that, and what we're going to work on next, is a mechanism to open pull requests to solve some of these rote problems. I go back to my original realization in the IDE, where I decided, I understood that rote tasks could be provided as suggestions and even as migrate buttons to developers. Why not do this directly into GitHub? This has to be informed by policy. All the considerations I talked about prior, about security vulnerabilities, architectural implications, legal implications, all of that has to go into what our component selection is. If as an organization you want to have evergreen, then we need to build some sort of policy around that. But as an organization, if you just want to update particular security vulnerabilities, given other license and architectural concerns, we need to support that as well. So there's no timetable, but the team will be working on it very soon, and I'm excited to see what comes out of this. And I think that's my talk, Mark.
All right. Thank you for such a closing slide. I have to give credit that you and Brian Fox are in sync, because I saw that slide earlier this morning.
I know, Brian, definitely spoiler alert. I saw that come out. I was like, come on, dude.
Chris, I see you there. You saw some stuff from Justin. Jump on in and ask any questions that you got of him. I think more than anything else, Justin, immediate timeline. What's the next thing that you're working on?
So immediately the stats should come out soon. The IDE migrate feature for IDEA and Visual Studio are going to come out. Those are both, within a month or so. The pull request, I've been talking to customers. I've been understanding truly what that policy means to how it should guide the pull request. But that's what the team's going to work on next. And then beyond that, there's nothing really concrete in the feature, or feature board or roadmap. But I've been talking about the vision. So solving some of those problems I spent the last 20 some odd minutes talking about is where my priority is. That's what I want to spend 2019 with. Great.
Chris, you look like you had a question.
Yeah, sort of. Actually, it was more of a comment. One of the things I saw earlier in Brian's talk was talking about the Chrome plugin for that we were starting to offer. And so it's the first time I've seen it in play and heard about it. So I'm actually really excited about it. I added a little bit of it to my slides today. So do you see more tools like that where we're shifting left even more? With our developers?
Yeah, so the Chrome plugin is an awesome example of the innovation at Sonatype and the ability for different engineers to solve different needs. My roadmap is very centered around source control, so I see most of the time spent there. And I would say source control management platforms. I don't want to be just GitHub specific. We have a lot of customers with GitHub, but if anyone out there is sitting saying, well, you didn't say my flavor of choice, I'd like to be able to provide that to everybody.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to see this. I know a lot of customers that are waiting for it, so very cool.
The other thing I heard new from you today too, Justin, is how big the uptake on DEPShield is. I didn't realize it was getting that much traction.
For sure. I cut this out of my talk, but I did want to mention how well AWS scales. The DEPShield is built on the backbone of Lambdas and Elastic containers. And oh my goodness, we have just been continuously adding more and more repositories to DEPShield. And I don't even see a blip in Amazon's capability to handle it all.
Oh, that's great. Hey, thanks. I know you're busy. Thanks for checking in with us. That was a nice update. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
If you'll go over to the Slack channel, say hi, upload your deck, and people will say thank you, and we'll call it a day with you.
Look forward to it. Thanks very much, Mark.
Thank you.
Cheers, Dustin.